The fundamental question of democracy probably lies in determining how it is that that people within a given society give their consent to be governed. This question has been essentially a key issue in political theory since the time of Aristotle. The question then becomes, how do men organize themselves within a society, and how do they give themselves to a subsection of their society? How do they give themselves to be governed? How do they have their economic and political concerns governed over by people who do not necessarily share their same interests in themselves or their own self-interest? Voluntarism, for a long time, was essentially the key component of Hobbesian, or the social contract theory of Thomas Hobbes. The idea was that people entered into society as a means of maintaining property, or the acquisition of property, and the maintenance of their lives, of a life free from violence. Purportedly, in pre-organized, or shall we say, in the times in which men were free of societies, were free of obligation one from the other, the ability to acquire property was simply based on brute strength. If I had issue with your having property next to mine, or I wanted your property, I could kill you and take it from you. This sort of arrangement obviously is not very, very conducive to civilization, the progress of technology and economic development. Voluntarism, on the other hand, was the idea that men willfully and freely entered in to society. Now, mind you, at the very beginning of social contract theory, there was never any concession as to equality. Therefore, one entered into society as a means of protecting one's person and protecting one's property. These are the ideas of, shall we say, the more conservative voluntarist conceptualist of social contract theory. More libertarian versions put forth by Robert Nozick and other contemporaries have claimed that others have entered, or that men have really entered into societies for the purposes of protecting person and acquiring property. Private property has to be the foundation of any social contract, or the foundation of any civilization in which the people give their will or give their consent to be governed. Hence, the sole purpose of government, therefore, is the protection of private property, and of course, the means by which it is acquired. That is, the keeping people free from fraud, and also maintaining the integrity of contracts. Others, on the other hand, have developed a more liberal version of social contract theory, particularly the line of development from Jean-Jacques Rousseau to John Rawls. This concept of social contract, or social contractarianism, is the idea that others have entered in society for the purposes of giving equality, that is, giving private property from the state of nature, and then having equality of opportunity and or, depending upon the political vogue of the time, equality of outcome. This idea, best expounded by Rawls, is simply this. Given a group of human beings under what he terms the veil of ignorance, they have no knowledge of their gender, no knowledge of their race, no knowledge of their standing within civil society, and no inherent self-interest that would necessarily bias them towards either large accumulations of private capital or large, very equivalent distributions of private capital, allow them to enter upon agreements as to how they shall be governed. In this veil of ignorance, Rawls shows through social choice theory, or game theory, that for a great extent, people would logically choose as their form of government a form of welfare liberalism. The idea that human beings would establish a government that allows for equality of opportunity and or equality of outcome within a system wherein private property is regulated through democratic means. By democratic, he does not specify whether it is a pure democratic means, or a representative democratic means, or a form of federalism of one sort or another. The aspect is merely this. As a principle of entering upon the social contract, individuals within the given society must be assured that they will always have equality of opportunity, and that the government that they choose will inherently always give them rights as according to their ability to play on the field of equality of opportunity and or outcome. This has essentially led the voluntarism debate astray. It has essentially moved conservative social contract theory into the domain of debating the extent to which governments that have been given consent by individuals within society are allowed to play or bias the game of the acquisition and exchange of private property. The more and more libertarian and more conservative views with regard to social contract theory want less and less of a construction of government. That is, all told, the conservative libertarian version pushes social contract theory back to its pre-Hobbesian roots. It's more interested in maintaining a minimal government that maintains nearly the state of nature. I will enter a contract with you to have my property protected and or acquire your property, but I also am resolved to use other means by which to do that. I would prefer to have my minimalist government look at my property rights and defend my contracts, but if all else fails, I can always dissolve the government if the government is not willing to do as I bid it, and then resort to the state of nature, use force, if I have force as my means. The listener may realize that this rule by force, so to speak, therefore presumes that only the weak within society will want to maintain government. That is, he who is strong, he who has the most guns or weapons or other, shall we say, in a pre-industrial society, the largest club or the largest means of exercising brute force over his neighbor for the acquisition of property will be less and less in favor of a government that protects his contracts if he believes that his contracts can be null and void in the state of nature and he can acquire more property. Therefore, conservatives have pushed the envelope, so to speak, of contract theory to the edge, to its logical conclusion. Government sole purpose is to allow for competition, whatever that competition is, and that contracts are mere formality. Social contract theory, therefore, stands at the most extreme versions of right-wing theory with regard to democracy. Democracies, one can imagine, as the listener might believe, that democracies come about with those who give their will to a government, want to maintain equalities of outcome and opportunity, and want the government to have a more extensive issue in their lives other than the protection of contracts. It is not necessary for a government to inherently be democratic if its sole purpose is to protect those who wish to acquire property or exchange property from fraud and from lack of integrity within contracts or the lack of a contract's fulfillment. On the liberal side, many have seen John Rawls' protection of the ideas of the veil of ignorance and therefore the equality of outcome and opportunity as a defense of liberal democracy. And many, though, have criticized him as not going far enough. How deep is the veil of ignorance? Is the veil of ignorance really responsible? Is it true that men can enter in a society without knowledge of gender or race or inherent inequalities in talent? All of these things are part of the Rawlsian system. One believes that as social contract theory develops and moves further to the left from Rawls, one will realize that a movement towards a more democratic socialist version of social contract theory, that is, exclusive formations of governments, consented governments, or consensual governments rather, that will focus upon equalities of outcome, less equalities of opportunity. That is considered the more conservative side of liberal contract theory or post-Enlightenment contract theory. Instead, the more liberal view takes it, or shall we say the more socialist view, takes it that equality of outcome within the veil of ignorance, not knowing one's gender, or in truth, the practice of the veil of ignorance, making it such that equality of outcome is not partitioned as according to race and gender and brute strength, shall we say. And as we move further away from the right-wing perspective, such is the development of social contract theory, largely divided between two camps. The main camp, and the camp that has essentially followed Rawls, finds its foundation in what is considered an excess of democracy. That is, it is important to use the Rawlsian social contract concept developed originally having its foundations in Rousseau around concepts of popular democracy, a true popular democracy, wherein representative democracy has less of the shielding than it has in actual practice, and shall we say, in real practicing state capitalist movements that claim to be social contractual. These democracies would, on the other hand, constantly ensure that not only the weak who have consented to being governed, but even those that believe that they have great advantages where they put in the state of nature will also be satisfied in that they will have equal voice. And if they indeed do have equality of outcome within the system, they will stand to benefit yet more from a full participation within a democratic social contractual scheme. On the other hand, the right-wing version, or shall we say the more conservative forms of voluntarism, of, shall we say, post-Kantian, or post those ideas that followed Immanuel Kant, those ideas of minimalist, or shall we say, a minimalist government with the least democracy favors only the strong, such that there stand to be no benefits for the weak and the strong as there are in the left version, but only for those who are willing not only to enforce their contracts within a minimalist state, but then to use force in the state of nature to back up a government they find is further too weak or too intrusive to their aims. These ideas of social contract theory, though based all the way back to Greek thought, have now found a renaissance, particularly with the writings of Rawls and Nozick, after having fallen out of favor with the rise of utilitarianism. Social contract theory right now stands at the very crux of arguments around the world, not only in the English-speaking world, arguments that find as their point the very justification of democracy in the world.